All right, gentlemen. Can you guys see my screen put together?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about paladins. So the all the class leads have been going through and doing these basic workshops to try to get all the members of the class together and do some formalized training. And the idea is two things. One, it's an opportunity for us all to get together, and two, like we have like general materials that we're putting together for new players. This is a resource that is geared towards people who are maybe not as exposed to the Paladin class as a lot of you guys probably are, in which case a lot of this material is going to be review for most of you, but some of it will go a little bit deeper into various topics that you may or may not have been exposed to. And so, over the course of this conversation, if a lot of this is pretty basic, that is by design. But if you have any questions at any point, don't hesitate to stop me and ask your questions. The whole point is to try to have a better Paladin core by the time we're done with this than where we started, right? So let's get this show on the road. Um, Here's a rough agenda that I'm going to take you guys through today. First, we're going to start with an overview of the benefits and drawbacks of the Paladin class at a really high level. Then I'm going to go through things that all of the specs have, right? So, spells and utilities that are shared across everybody that all Paladins should be using when applicable. There's a lot of utility in the Paladin class that it does not depend on your spec, and just because we're pigeonholed into healing or tanking or DPS roles doesn't mean that that's the only thing we can do, right? Like people can, all of the specs can be cleansing and should be, that kind of thing. After that, I'm going to go through a little bit of a deeper dive into the three discrete specs. The most most time I'm going to spend in this call is going to be on Holy, since that's where Paladins really shine in Classic. Don't worry, TBC is coming, and when that happens, we'll be able to do both tanking and DPS much better than we do today. Although we are good tanks today, we will really grow into those roles. But as we all know, Holy is really the raid spec for Paladins, so that's where I'm going to put the most focus. All right, high level overview. Why did we roll Paladins? Um, for raiding, we are the best single target and tank healers in the game. I think that's pretty uncontroversial. We just have great single target throughput and super high mana efficiency. We can pump flash of lights out all day. That does come at a cost though. We don't have any AO heals and we don't have any hots. And because most are like the heals that we're using 95% of the time have cast times, we're not nearly as mobile as the other healing classes, right? Next, we are uniquely qualified as AoE tanks. However, on the tanking front, we don't have taunts, there's no ranged pull, and we are very reliant on reactive damage in order to maintain threat on targets. So that creates some unique challenges to the Paladin tanks, which kind of leaves us, especially in raid situations, not as viable as a bear or a warrior. And then last thing we bring is we do have a ton of utility. In like all three specs, we have some of the best buffs in the game. We've got auras that bring unique benefits as well. We've got judgments that we can be using on targets to bring out different utility. We've got all kinds of different utility that we can bring. However, Blizzard did hit us pretty hard with the hybrid tax, and DPS is just like not as good as other classes because we've got all these other things that we can be doing, right? Um, while we are able to off do a bunch of roles, really the only role right now that we can do at a raid consistent level is really healing. So, looking at an overview of our utility spells, this in my view is where like Paladin class really shines, as we are super versatile beasts while we're out doing things. First, we'll start with the greater blessings that we have. This is a rough order of if you're in a really geared group, which blessings are probably the most important for you to be using. I'm assuming that all you guys play Paladin, so I'm not going to spend any time going over what the different abilities are doing, but if anybody needs a refresher, don't hesitate to stop and ask me. Um, but the most important thing when it comes to greater blessings is that everyone should have Pally Power. Pally Power is the add-on that will not only keep track of your buff timers and the different buffs you're putting on each different class, but you click on free assignment and then one paladin in your group or in your raid usually will coordinate um, all of the buffs for everybody. So it makes sure that each of the paladins is doing a unique buff and doing it on the right groups of people. So you guys can just skip the whole start of the group conversation of, yo, you gonna do kings or you want me to do kings conversation. There's an add-on that just solves that for us, right?
I do have a
It's
question about that real quick,
yeah,
since we're on
totally.
that topic. Um, how do you do different buffs on the same, like if you want to put salve on the warrior tank, or I'm sorry, salve on the warriors, but not the warrior tank, how do you split that with,
That's
with
an
Pally Power?
option when you open it. There's an option in Pally Power that when you open it and you click on the raid tab for what to default the tanks to. And if the
Oh,
tanks are in the tank frame,
I see. Okay, thank you.
And Escanor, I know that you do this when you're blessing salve on people. Do you use the tank tab or like tag, or do you individually go through and change the talents or the blessings for people?
I for specifically rating 3, I change hits and silver and maybe dude broman to blessing of light if we are down a paladin. So that means that we have to do drop light for everybody else and maybe, but I don't like dropping it for tanks. So yeah, I go in and click their names and put blue. So whenever you're hovering over Pally Power and you can hover over it and you can see everybody's name under that tab, it'll have those tanks as blue. So you right click them to give them the 5 minute buff
And
of light.
is that using the tank tag that like the raid leader set, or you uniquely pick those guys out? Because I know
You
that
uniquely pick them out.
okay, good. Because I know that like some healers have add-ons that use that like tank label in raid frames. I don't, with the way I heal, I don't use that. I just know who the tanks are, and
Right.
once the raid
Same.
starts going, it's pretty obvious in your add-ons who's tanking, whether they're supposed to be or not. You can see who's taking the damage. So I don't ever use those tank tabs, but I know that some people or those tags, but I know that some people do try to
It
rely on them.
You can
Um,
change it in your Pally Power to make it to where you can auto buff tanks with a certain thing or different things like that, but it's so situational that we always have a 4-man Pally comp
yeah,
that you don't have to worry about it.
I prefer the custom go through and like pick who's going to be tanking, so you can do that. But yeah, great question. But yeah, so Pally Power really like 10 out of 10 add-on. It just takes something that used to rely on a bunch of coordination through like chat bubbles and turns it into an add-on, which is great. Um, and then my rough order for blessings, salvation is really, especially with the geared groups that we're running right now, that is the biggest buff that you can put on your DPS. It allows them to do 40% more damage before they're going to rip threat from a tank than they would be without salvation on, which is huge. It really just lets the DPS run wild. I used to put might on warriors and rogues when I was running like 20 mans, but now I've gotten enough requests for salve specifically that I just basically give everybody salve if I'm the only paladin, except for the tanks, who I'll overwrite with a 5 minute light just to really let the DPS go wild without having to worry about pulling threat. Once you
Well,
get the raid, yeah, somebody gonna say something?
sorry, I was just asking why you put in a 5 minute light and not the greater light.
Well, if I have
Or do-
salve on like most of the warriors, then I'll just put the shorter light on the tanks rather than because then it's just less people that I have to rebuff every 5 minutes than if I've got like 5 warriors and 3 of them are tanks. Although in like a 20-man, you could just put light on all the warriors and you're probably fine.
You can't put greater light on one warrior and then greater salve on the rest of the warriors.
Right, because they'll overwrite.
Oh, I see.
So that's what it does. Either way, in Pally Power, you set up so that you give all the warriors greater salve, and then you give 5 minutes to the tank. And Pally Power will tell you how long is left, and so it knows that you know when you need to rebuff the 5-minute guys.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something that I was going to get into a little bit later, but it's a good thing to bring up now if that's already come up, is that all of these blessings, you can only have one blessing per target per paladin, right? So this order is kind of assuming that like once you get up to 4 paladins, which most of the raid teams have, you've got all of these blessings covered for your whole raid, right? But if you have less than that, then you need to start prioritizing in like 20 mans where you might have only 1 or 2 paladins you really need to prioritize. Um, and then some of the lesser known blessings that you can get, like a blessing of protection or a blessing of freedom, those will overwrite the like greater blessing. So you might need to come through and like rebuff those blessings after you use them, since that's how the blessing system works. But blessing prio, salve top, then might is the best blessing for DPS, for melee DPS. Warrior, don't put it on hunters since it has only melee attack power, but hunter pets will appreciate it. Kings then is the third choice for DPS. It'll really benefit all classes. This is better for hunters because it'll buff their agility, which will give them attack power. Then wisdom is for mana using classes. Once you've got like might on the warriors and rogues and ferals, then wisdom everybody else, you've got them covered. And then last but not least is light. When I'm in a 40-man, light is unfortunately usually the first to fall off the DPS because it only benefits other paladins. So really it's like a third or not even a half of the healers that are benefiting. It is super powerful to keep on tanks though. So as Galamera said, if you keep salve on your if you're down a paladin and like the best practice is your Salvation Paladin will bless light on the tanks so that they are still using a blessing, and because they're gonna drop the salvation anyways. All right, next auras. This again is a rough order for the prio. The Fire, Frost, Shadow Resistance aura is the most powerful if we can actually apply it, right? Really depends on what damage is coming in. The Shadow Resistance aura is made obsolete by the Prayer of Shadow Protection by priests. So on a fight like Twin Imps, we don't usually use it because the priest buff is actually better, and you can only use one, they don't stack. If you're not using a resistance aura, then Devo is your next best aura. It just gives everybody armor. A bit more armor is not going to hurt anybody, especially the Clothies, who it could actually be like a significant buff for their armor. Retribution is pretty much I only use it for tanking or like questing, right? If I'm not farming, I'll put Retribution aura on. It's just a little bit more DPS. Little reactive damage. If I don't need Devotion aura, then that's fine. Concentration aura is a really situational one, but it can be really powerful, specifically since a lot of healers have a talent which will decrease pushbacks by 70%. If you add concentration aura on top of that, then healers will no longer get any pushback when they take damage. So if you're in a situation where spellcasters are taking damage, concentration aura is probably a good idea. Any situation you're in where spellcasters are taking damage is a pretty tricky situation. It doesn't come up a ton, but it can be useful. And then Sanctity aura I included just because it is one. Retribution Paladins get it in their tree. It buffs holy damage, which really only helps Retribution Paladins or Protection Paladins if you have one in your group. It does make Prop Paladins really happy to get an extra 10% holy damage, but it's, again, pretty situational, and you're basically never going to see it in a raid. All right, and then we've got general utilities. This is kind of like my catch-all for other utility abilities that we should be using no matter what spec you are. Cleansing is great. Um, Always be cleansing. If you're not a holy paladin, you should still be cleansing your party. It, at the very least, helps your healers out. You can keep people alive, take poisons off, remove magic debuffs. Um, Cleanse is also super powerful against lots of fears, so keep that in mind. That you can be cleansing, you should be cleansing a lot of fears that people will get. Um, Especially since in the holy tree we get a talent where we've got a 10% chance to resist fears. So if you resist a fear and other people around you are feared, like get on the cleansing. It's super powerful. Um, Next, we got Judgment of Light and Wisdom. This will help the whole party or raid reclaim some health or mana every time they're hitting whichever target you judge this on, right? It is super powerful for long fights, especially Wisdom. We see that cost all the time. Um, I specifically called out like the general fight in AQ20 where people are consistently calling for Wisdom. And Cthulhu is another good choice to be always judging Wisdom. Light gets a little bit of a short shrift, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be judging Light as well. If you're ever considering whether you should put Wisdom on a boss and you see it's already there, you should be judging Light onto that boss. A little bit of extra healing will not hurt anybody, and we're not worried about hitting the like debuff limit anymore. So Judgment of Light is always a good idea to be adding if Wisdom is already there. Um, Hammer of Justice is one of those abilities which nobody should be sleeping on as well. We have a stun, and it's got a little bit of a range to it, so that is something that can be really powerful to be using. It can interrupt spellcasters if we need to be doing that. If you're in the position to do that, it'll really help out the raid a lot. Um, Looking at this list, it is always surprising like how many different utility spells paladins have, and it's easy to sometimes get caught in your little bubble of I'm just casting Flash of Light, and we really shouldn't be doing that. We bring a lot more to the raid than just like a heal bot, which some people might think that we are, but we really have a lot that we bring. Um, and then I've got a list here of some of the lesser blessings. Like I mentioned before, these will overwrite your other blessings, which usually in the situation you're casting one of these, it's more important to get Death's Blessing on than it is to worry about like Blessing of Might or whatever. Um, but here they are. Blessing of Protection is the most famous. Go ahead and bubble a party member. Um, this we see used all the time. You should never be using this on a tank though, because you bubble the tank will drop threat on everything. Everything will go after somebody else if you do this on a tank. So that will be probably catastrophic. However, it can be used really well on a DPS, for example, if they're about to run into a big group and sapper or do a bunch of AoEs. So that is a good opportunity. I will amend, the one time you are allowed to cast Blessing of Protection on a tank is when they tell you to, and they're going to use their AoE taunt. That is something that tanks will sometimes do, but you will get explicit warning ahead of time. That is the one time you have my blessing to cast for Blessing of Protection on a tank. Blessing of Freedom removes movement impairing effects, and it does last, like, I should have looked this up, at like 10 or 15 seconds. So you can free somebody up. 10 seconds? Great. So it's not just like a release now, it will also last a little while so that person can keep moving. Pretty situational, but can be really nice if you've got something like vines. Well, vines can typically be cleansed, but if you've got like a net on somebody that you can't cleanse, you can Blessing of Freedom and free them from that. Blessing of Sacrifice is a kind of niche little blessing. It will transfer a small amount of damage from the target to you, right? So the way that I think this was thought of is you could put it on a tank, and some of the tank's damage will be diverted to you, and you can use your health as like a little bit of a tank battery. It does have a limit on how much damage will transfer. I think it's like 55. And the one utility besides like maybe taking a little bit of damage off the tank that it can be used if you can cast it ahead of time it will break a polymorph. So if you've got Blessing of Sacrifice on somebody, you get polymorphed. That damage can reflect back onto you from the blessing and break your polymorph. So if you have the foresight to do that, it is a good idea. It's not a great idea to necessarily put it on your tank if your tank is taking a lot of individual hits, because the damage can add up fast. Or your tank is taking like lots and lots of hits. I personally died once on the Prophet Skyrim because I got mind controlled. While I was mind controlled, I casted Blessing of Sacrifice on the boss, and the boss was getting pummeled by a 40-man raid, so I went down in like 2 seconds. Um, Lesson learned is I should have bubbled in that time, but by the time I realized what was happening, I was already on the ground. So something to be careful about, and something that can happen in a very weird situation.
Which bubble would you put on yourself for that instance?
I just always use Divine Shield.
Intervention. Okay.
So that's the self buff, right? Because you've got Blessing Protection, which you can cast on yourself or somebody else, and then I think it's Divine Shield is what it's called.
Divine Shield, yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
one that will cast on yourself. They have separate cooldowns, so you can Divine Shield yourself, and then they share a Forbearance cooldown, so you can't Blessing of Protection yourself again for a minute, but you can still keep Blessing of Protection up and use on somebody else. And additionally, Divine Shield is a little bit better. It will block, I think that Blessing Protection only will block physical damage. Divine Shield makes you invulnerable. And I think that Divine Blessing Protection means you can't attack, and Divine Shield doubles the time between attacks, but you can still attack. So, yeah, it is a little bit better for you to use the Divine Shield if you're bubbling yourself.
Well, and if you bopped yourself, then you would take off the sacrifice. So.
Right, you would do it like whatever other blessing you have, like you're taking off with that. So that's also right.
But there are some bosses in TBC where you do want to put sacrifice on, and then there's some other places where you want to put sacrifice on and bubble.
Oh yeah, so you're just like soaking the damage into your bubble so it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense.
But like the
The
big
box.
tall woman in Kara, if you put sacrifice on when she sleeps everybody, then when she goes and hits the tank, it'll wake you up so you can heal them.
Nice. Yeah, see, it's got its situational uses.
Right, like Arena.
Yeah, yeah. All right, last blessing I've got here is Sanctuary. This is the prot talent. Reduces incoming damage and also will deal holy damage on blocks. The incoming damage reduction is a flat damage reduction, and it is applied before armor. So it's really good on content when you're taking a lot of smaller hits. It's not as useful in a raid situation, except for the holy damage on blocks. Holy damage on a block is always good, especially with holy shields, just like hitting them back for more holy. But the damage reduction really, like, it doesn't scale, so it's not going to be helpful if somebody's hitting you for a couple hundred, as much as you're getting hit a bunch of times for like 50. All right, emergency utility. So here's another thing that Paladins are really good at, is we've got a lot of things that we can do when things are really going sideways. So Divine Shield and Blessing Protection, those are both of our bubbles. We can bubble ourselves and we can bubble somebody else. They don't share a cooldown, but they do put forbearance on your target, so you can't bubble yourself twice in a row or like that kind of thing. Reiterating that you don't want to use Blessing Protection on a tank, because it will just send whatever the tank is tanking to whoever's next on the threat list. Good for putting on Gala before he goes in and does a bunch of AoE. And Divine Shield is also really powerful because it will break a lot of status effects. So if you're feared, you can Divine Shield yourself and you will break the fear. So always keep that in mind. It is something that I keep like right on my bar ready to go. Super, super powerful. And it's only got a 5-minute cooldown on Divine Shield. So like you should feel pretty free to use it because the cooldown is not that long. Unlike Lay on Hands. Lay on Hands has an hour down to 40 minutes cooldown if you're talented in it. That is your emergency heal for if you see the tank is down and like maybe about to die. Lay on hands is the move. Um, it will wipe your mana, but it will also heal the tank for the amount of health that you have, which can be huge. It is instant cast. It has a full range, so you can cast at a range you don't. Despite being called lay on hands, it does not have a short range on it, so it's huge. Um, One other thing that you can do with lay on hands, if you have improved lay on hands, it will also buff the tank's armor for 30% for 2 minutes, which is pretty long. Can make the difference if you're in a situation where the tank is really low. It can also be used to pre-buff the tank before like big boss damage to give them that 30% armor buff. Really useful. Has a long cooldown though, so be careful with it. And after you use it, you gotta drink up to get your mana back if you're like using it before a boss pull. Divine Intervention is our wipe prevention skill. Everybody should be using this no matter what your spec again. If you are like a red or prop paladin in a group, you can still save everybody from a wipe by dropping this ability. It will kill you, but it will save whoever you target for 3 minutes, so that they can wait out the fight and then drop the Divine Intervention and start rezzing the group. Your top target for this, if a wipe is coming, is to make sure that another healer is going to stay up. In those situations, they have a soul stone. If you can check and make sure, or if you know ahead of time that another healer is soul stoned, the best target for your Divine Intervention is the main tank of the raid. If you can save the main tank of the raid, and you can save their world buffs, you will make the rest of the night much easier for yourself and for everyone else in the raid. Because if the main tank retains their world buffs, that is the most important person to have world buffs, since they'll still be pumping out throughout the rest of the night. And if the main tank loses their world buffs, then everybody else has their the amount of damage that they can do potentially throttled by that tank's threat. So that is a really good idea for all paladins to consider. What's up? Never mind. This is something that I would recommend that paladins have a macro just like on their bars ready to go. So if things are going sideways, that you can just go ahead and push one button and DI somebody. I have coordinated with the paladins on raid team 1 on who their assignments are in the case of a wipe. So specifically, the main tank and off tank of the raid have 2 paladins assigned to those people, so that if we're going to wipe, those are specifically our targets. Many times, unfortunately, by the time a wipe is called, one or both of those tanks might be down, so you might need to DI somebody else, but it is always a good idea to have that ready to go. Don't forget about it. While everybody's wiping, it is a stressful time, and unless you have incredible presence of mind, it was a really hard time for you to be finding a target and finding your DI button while things are falling apart around you. So before that happens, pick your target, have a macro ready to go, and so when you need it, you can just push one button and be ready to go with the DI. Finally, after you've DI'd the tank and the priest with the soul stone is back up and rezzing everybody, join in with redemptions and heal everybody up, res everybody. We are one of the classes that has a resurrection spell, so don't ever forget to use it, even if you're the tank. All right, spec-specific stuff. Starting with Holy, the spec that will get you into a raid. Holy gets a bad reputation for having very few spells in its rotation, and that is only partially true. Flash of Light is the workhorse of the Pally healer. However, it is far and away, it is definitely not our only spell. It is really huge. It's not a huge heal, but it is a hugely efficient and fast direct heal that we should be using most of the time. The max rank only costs 140 mana, and rank 1 only costs 35 mana. That is basically free. By the time you have pretty good gear, rank 1 will be healing for several hundred every 1.5 seconds. So it is still a material heal. Um, Basically, you should be casting Flash of Light all of the time. Like, as a Paladin, if you're not casting a Flash of Light and the party is taking damage, like something is going wrong. You must be out of mana, like something's up. Basically, you should just always be casting it. If nobody in the part raid is taking any damage, precast it on the tank. Just always be casting a Flash of Light. Um, Paladins, we're not gearing into spirit, so we're not like other healers who are maybe waiting for some downtime to get some spirit regen going. That's not our bailiwick. That's not how we're playing the class. Always be casting a Flash of Light. Um, Holy Light is probably is our next like canonically famous spell. Um, Much longer cast time, and by that I mean 1 second longer. Um, and a much larger heal, much less efficient, like much more expensive mana-wise than Flash of Light though. Um, Max rank is 600 mana versus 140 for Flash of Light, but it will drop a huge heal. The thing about Holy Light is that because it takes a long time to heal, and it is so big, being able to take advantage of it, like there are only specific times in a raid where you'll be able to take advantage of a full Holy Light heal. Um, Scrolls of Blinding Light, which are the trinket that you can get in BWL that will increase your casting time by 33%, does make spamming Holy Lights a lot easier to do. It cuts down that 2.5 second cast time. Um, but like I said, Flash of Light is really going to be your workhorse spell. Holy Light is really when the raid is taking a ton of damage and you need to be putting out as much healing as possible. And then Holy Shock does have a 30-second cooldown, but it is an instant heal that is it's the capstone of the Holy Tree that we should again be using. It's great because it's instant. It is more expensive than a Flash of Light, but it will come out right away rather than waiting 1.5 seconds. Additionally, if you use Divine Favor with your Holy Shock, you will get an instant cast, like guaranteed crit. And this is a tip from Escanor. Uh, you pop your Divine Favor, pop a Holy Shock, and so you don't care about the mana cost anymore. Since it's going to be a guaranteed crit, you're going to get that mana refunded, and you can get an instant heal on somebody like when they really need it. Another thing to keep in mind with Holy Shock, it is because it has no cast time. It is our only heal that we can cast while we're moving. So Lay on Hands has no cast time either, but that's a 40-minute cooldown. So realistically, no. So if you want to be casting while you're on the move, Holy Shock is really your one option. Otherwise, you need to plant your feet to start casting one of our other spells. Blessing of Protection, again, is another heal. Blessing of Sacrifice is a little bit of a heal in the sense that it's at least transferring some damage from your tank to you. Not truly a heal, but it does help out. And then Lay on Hands, I've talked about a little bit. I didn't put down there's not really a rotation for both Paladins or for healing in general. You have to really be paying attention to what the situation calls for and what heals are needed at a given time. So I didn't put that on this, but these are like really the big healing spells that you guys should be casting.
So you would have max. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So you would have max rank and rank 1 Flash of Light and Holy Light ready at all times? Or there's the two ranks you would keep?
I don't ever downrank my Holy Light because and I don't really have a good reason for it. Well, yeah, I don't really downrank Holy Light. If I'm casting Holy Light, there's huge damage coming in, and I'm trying to get as much throughput as I can possibly get out, right? I will downrank Flash of Light when mostly if the raid is not taking much damage and I'm worried about my mana. So on Twin Amps, I will sometimes downrank. I mean, the general rule is I look at my mana bar and I look at the boss's health. And if my mana bar is lower than the boss's health, then I either need to pop a pot or I need to start like downranking some spells potentially to make myself last through this fight. Ideally, you want to like end the fight with 0 mana. That means you've like done as much good as you can throughout the fight, right? Um, so I will downrank Flash of Light when, obviously I only do it when there's not that much damage coming in, and I'm worried about my mana. Quite frankly, if I have world buffs, then even a longer fight like Twin Imps, I don't have to worry about my mana because our crit gets so high. Like world buffs, I've got like 30 to 40% crit. So that means that percentage of my spells are coming back, refunding their mana. So um, you get really, really efficient with all those world buffs on and the extended mana pool you're going to get from Blessing of Kings and Zandalar. So, and if you're really sweaty, you can get 10 MP5 from Rend. But yeah, I only ever downrank my Flash.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't done experiments with. I bet you that a downranked Holy Light is probably not doing like your max rank Flash of Light probably catches up to a downranked Holy Light at a certain point. But I haven't really experimented with that very much. All right, next here is the spec that I recommend for talents. I go 5 points into the Retribution tree to get Greater Blessing of Might, 11 points into the Protection tree to get Blessing of Kings. Along the way, I pick up Improved Blessing of Protection, Improved Devo Aura, and Toughness, which will give me increased armor. And then the rest of the points go into the Holy Tree. Pretty much every talent that's going to increase your healing you can pick up. You can play around with this build a little bit, but like this is what I would recommend for Paladins because it gives you all of the main buffs that you want for the raid. That way your raid lead can put you on whatever buff and know that you've got the most improved version of it, rather than having to like play around with making sure that the Paladin who's casting might on everybody is spec'd into improved might and all that.
What's the reason for consecration in Holy?
Consecration is dope.
For healing?
I mean, you're not really going to use it as a healer except when Cthulhu is in his weakened state and you're trying to actually do some damage. It is super.
Insidious.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Never mind.
I mean, it's
You can also use consecration on Visidius when the globs are coming back together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, consecration is a pretty iconic ability. It's only 1 point. I'm not really sure it's taking away from anything else. And yeah, it's not something that you're going to use generally when you're healing, but it doesn't hurt us to pick it up.
Any opportunity to AoE is good.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool.
Cool. All right, this is listing out the core talents and like why. Illumination, this is probably the most important. This is where your crit heals are going to refund your mana. One thing to note is that they refund your mana. The spells are not free, so if you don't have enough mana to cast it, you still can't cast it, even if it would have crit. Divine Favor guarantees a crit. You can go ahead and cast it in advance. The cooldown will start ticking once you cast that next heal that will crit. Combined with Illumination, this means that crit is that next heal is guaranteed to be free. So take advantage of that. Spiritual Focus, less likely to lose casting time when being hit, which is great because we're always casting. You got your blessings. Lasting Judgment is great because it increases the duration of your Judgment of Light and Wisdom, which is good because you can just rejudge every 30 seconds rather than having to go up and hit the boss every 10 seconds. Really makes it viable. Otherwise, you'd see a lot more Paladins hitting things with their hammers. Improved Lay on Hands I talked about, and Holy Shock I've also talked about. Here is the stat priority for Holy Paladins. Number 1 is Healing Power. That's pretty straightforward. Just going to drive up the amount you're healing per second and also your efficiency for the same reason, right? Your mana cost is not going up per spell, so you're getting more healing per mana. Intellect then is number 2. Gives you 15 mana per point, and for every 60 points in it, you get 1% more crit. which is great because those crits are free. Then you've got just straight crit percent. That's your third best stat. And then MP5. MP5 is going to be increasingly useful as fights get longer. So far, none of the fights are really so long that you feel the impact on like a 2 or 3 minute fight. MP5 is not making a bigger difference. However, that may change when we're going into max. I put on here an equivalence, some equivalences so that you can kind of game out which pieces of gear are better for you. One crit is equal to 4.6 MP5 if you're spam casting max rank Flash of Light. So that's something you can use to compare pieces of gear. And then the benefit of crit as compared to plus healing is going to change as your plus healing increases, right? The more plus healing you have, the bigger your crits. And so the more valuable 1% crit is. So that table on the right shows you, based on the plus healing you already have on your gear, what the equivalent plus healing would be to equal 1% crit on a healing per second, like from a healing per second perspective, while spam casting max rank Flash of Light again. These numbers would change if you were like downranking Flash of Light or if you're going to try to cast Holy Light or those kinds of things. But since Flash of Light is really our workhorse, that is the most relevant number that you can use to try to game out which gear is going to give you the best healing per second. Any questions on stat priority or these numbers? Awesome. Raid consumes. Flask of Distilled Wisdom is huge, plus 2,000 mana. Basically required for progression. I've used it for every single AQ that we've run. And I'm going to be stocking up before Nax. Basically no excuse to not use these. They are more expensive, and if you're running like a 20 man, you don't need to be flasking up. But if we're trying to progress, there's like it should be a required consumable for all Paladins. We're really trying to help the raid team move forward. Brilliant Wizard Oil is much more affordable and should basically be used all the time. I think last time I bought them, they were like 11 or 12 gold, but they have 5 charges in them. So that's for 2.5 hours worth of Brilliant Wizard Oil. So pretty affordable as far as consumes go. Plus 36, it's actually spell healing or damage. So if you're going to cast your consecrations, it'll help you with that too. And a 1% crit, which helps us both with throughput and with mana efficiency. Mana pots and dark runes, we should be using as needed, right? You don't need to be if you're not going through your mana, you don't need to be chugging major mana potions, but in progression, you should have a stash of them on hand so that you're ready to use them as needed. Combat mana potions are the potions that you can get from the PvP vendor in Stormwind. You should just always have 5 of those. 5 is the max you can carry. You don't have to be in a battleground to use them. They're like 11 gold. They're a great deal. You should always have those
I'm sorry, they're 10 silver.
Oh yeah, 10 silver. Sorry, yeah, that's a big difference. So 10 silver.
Yeah, 9 silver.
Yeah, they're like the 10 or 11. I don't remember. I don't know what they are exactly. And what they are based on my reputation discount or whatever. But they're cheap enough that you can get 5 of them for like under 60 gold or 60 silver. I keep wanting to say gold, but it's not. It's just silver. They're real cheap. Just go use them. Never leave house without symbols of kings and symbols of divinity. Just no excuse for it. And then a shield is something that I recommend that all Holy Paladins carry, even if you don't use it all the time. If you have a shield in your bag and you are worried about incoming damage, you can throw the shield on, and last time I checked, if I put my shield on, my armor literally doubles. So really nice thing to have, especially during progression, if we're expecting more damage to be coming healer's way. I know it shouldn't be coming our way, but if it is, better to have it and not need it. It's just one slot and can add a lot of armor, even if it's not like a healing shield. Alright, some tips and tricks, some miscellaneous things I wanted to include. Librum of Divinity. If you don't have it, you should get it. Every paladin needs to have it. It gives you plus 53 healing on your Flash of Light, which is just enormous. It drops in Scholomance from, I think it's like a dungeon random drop, so you just need to run Skolo. In like 2 or 3 runs, you'll have it. Everybody's running Skolo anyways for UD rep, or Argent Dawn rep right now, so like if you don't have it, you need to get it. Divine Favor I've talked about. Divine Shield I've talked about as well. You can use it to break fears, which is pretty nice. You can use it to break mind control too. You get mind control, go ahead and Divine Shield yourself and break out of it. Improve lay on hands I've talked about. And Holy Shock, it can be used as a heal and it can also be used as a damage ability. So during Cthulhu's weaken phase, when we're all trying to put as much damage into the boss as we can so we can one phase it this time, go ahead and pop a Holy Shock on Cthulhu if you want. Get some damage in there. Alright, that's the end of my Holy section. I'll give us a chance. Anybody have any questions about Holy?
I had one question as an outsider who's played a lot of healers but not Holy Paladin. World buffs with the amount of crit, is it nice to have or a night and day difference with the crit percent chance?
It is night and day. Twin Imps is the one fight.
I figured as much math-wise, but
yeah.
I'm just kind of curious on the actual in practice.
Well, so
crit is reciprocal. So if you have no crit, going from 0 to 1 is not going to help you. But since we get 100% of our mana back, if you had 50% crit, each time that if you casted 100 heals, you would get your mana back on 50 of them, which would mean you could cast 25 more heals, and you would get your mana back on 25 of those. Then you could 12 and a half. So the more crit you have, the more valuable it is. So something like Songflower that gives 5% crit is really valuable because they take you from like 30% to 35% or something.
Yeah, that's right. In addition to that, while you're getting those free heals, your like MP5 is still chugging in the background. So like the longer the fight, the more mana you're getting from those passive sources. And finally, like when you get your world buffs, not only is our crit going up like 15-20%, but we get our Zandalar buff, so our int is now buffed 15% too. So not only are our spells like much cheaper, but our mana pool is also much larger when we unboon.
Yeah, I was kind of, my question is more from a practicality standpoint. Is like, I know like Paladins, like the best thing about them is like your quick heals are mana efficient. They're mana efficient by nature. Like you have decent crit. Is it so much different that you're like, I'm struggling without this, or is it, or like I'm good without it, but or is it like just it's a different level?
The fight where it makes the most difference for me is Twin Imps. And in Twin Imps, if we do not have world buffs, I am potting on cooldown and I am like popping dark runes. If I have my world buffs, I do not need to pot the entire fight. It is that big of a difference.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking because I've main healed like tanks on Twin Imps as a shaman, and like we're chugging mana consumes like regardless. But yeah, I was kind of curious how Paladins do on efficiency.
Oh, yeah. For me, it's the difference between parsing and not parsing. We still get all the bosses down at one shot, but if you've lost your world buffs, you're not going to parse.
Yeah, and plus the crit is like it also leads to a bigger.
I disagree with that statement.
Well, Escanor, we know you can crit under, or you can parse under any circumstances. You're just an unstoppable Energizer Bunny of heals.
I mean,
yeah,
I just think that healers need to understand that world buffs can't just carry you. You need to have an array of mana pots and stuff to be able to help your team.
You do. Yeah, I mean, that's right. We shouldn't use these world buffs as a crutch. That's definitely true.
There is zero substitute for more mana if you have the option to use it.
Yeah. And the other benefit of crit is that it's increasing the heal. Like, let's not forget we're getting 50% more healing from those heals too. So like we're getting it coming and going with like more efficient, bigger heals. So we need to cast less of them. Like it's like a spinning wheel of just like all the benefits going in one direction. It's awesome. Next, I'm going to dump into the prot spec. I will admit that I have not done a ton of tanking this version of Classic, but I have done some before, so I am at least passable. So I'll go through this, and if people have more sophisticated tank questions, I will defer to some of our Paladin friends in the chat who have also been doing a little more tanking. But let's go ahead and kick this off. For prot, I'm going to actually do this backwards. So for gearing priorities, this is probably something that it doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. You do need to have all plate and a shield. You cannot tank if you do not have all plate armor on, and like while you're leveling or while you're healing, you might not pay attention to what the armor class you have on is. Once you switch over to tanking, it will make a huge difference. We're not two-handed tanking either. We're pretty much tanking with the shield, unlike the warriors. So that's not necessarily because we need the mitigation, but like things like Holy Light or Holy Shield, you cannot use without a shield. Fast one-handed weapons are the bread and butter of a prot paladin. It'd be nice if you had spell power on them, but the Flurry Axe is the best weapon because it is 1.5 speed and it will proc more attacks for you. More attacks is always better for a prot paladin, and that's because of the ways that the seal of righteousness scales, as well as judgment of light and wisdom. They will just like stack linearly, not dependent on speed. So the faster your weapon is, the better, more benefit you get out of those seals and judgments. We might get into that a little bit more detail if people have questions about that. For survivability, stamina, armor, defense rating, pretty straightforward stuff. And then to increase your threat, spell damage and strength are your stats to just be to driving up your damage, which is then going to increase your threat. For a holy paladin or for a prot paladin, righteous fury is the key. So getting up to the rotation a little bit. Righteous fury is your ability that will increase the threat generated by all your holy damage. If you're not talented into it, it's 150% threat. If you're talented into it, I think it goes up to 190% threat for all your holy damage. So now you're getting double the threat you should have gotten from your holy damage, which is awesome. You go ahead and bless yourself with Sanctuary. It will help reduce some damage coming in, but also it gives you that holy damage on blocks, which is great. Give Salvation to the rest of the party so that you can hold threat and they can do as much damage as they want. It's a win-win situation. Holy Shield should basically always be up if you're tanking. Not only is it mitigation, but it is a huge threat generator because it's dealing holy damage. If you got your Sanctuary, you're doing more holy damage, and Holy Shield has another threat multiplier on the holy damage from the shield, right? So it's just like threat on threat on threat if you've got Holy Shield up. And it's mitigating damage by increasing your blocks. It's like really central to Paladin tanking. The other ability that is central to Paladin tanking is Consecration. I'm sure everybody knows this, but Consecration is doing holy damage to everybody, and then like that plus Holy Shield plus Retribution Aura is the bread and butter of Paladin AoE tanking. We're dealing damage to everybody around us. You don't have to worry about tab targeting because you're just dealing damage to everybody because as they're hitting you, you're hitting them back and your Consecration is grabbing them. If you're doing it right, really the first mob in a pull is the one that you need to worry about holding threat on. By the time that first mob is down and your Consecration has been rolling and your Holy Shield and your Retribution Aura have been dealing damage to everybody around, you should pretty handily have threat on the other targets in your pull. Exorcism is an ability to keep in mind, especially in like Skolo and Strat Undead. It is a ranged ability, which we can use on Undead. Can't use on living targets, unfortunately, but it's basically the closest thing we have to a taunt. Judgment of Righteousness can also do that to a lesser extent, but it doesn't have the range and it doesn't do as much damage, so it's not nearly as useful in that regard. Also, I know this meeting was supposed to end in about 3 minutes, but I'm just going to keep on rolling through. If people need to drop, my feelings will not be hurt, and assuming that this recording is going as I think it should be, I will upload that after this is done. Any questions on prop rotation or gearing? I kind of went through that pretty fast, but thoughts, questions, concerns? Cool. Here's a protection set of talents that I picked. You go down into Holy for Consecration. Really, Consecration is key to protection paladin tanking. And then in the Retribution tree, I got 9 points in there because that second row talent is increasing your parry. So getting 4% parry is really nice. And then you go 31 points into protection to get the relevant talents there. This next slide actually breaks out more detail on what the key talents are. Holy Shield is your key reactive damage talent. Increases your block and damages enemies with holy damage. Consecration is huge. Deals AoE damage to everybody. It's holy damage, so you get your Righteous Fury multiplier. You might need to carry mana potions to keep it up, though, because it is an expensive spell. And so this is why prop paladins go It is because they are consecrating all over the place, so it is something to keep in mind. Righteous Fury you want to just keep up all the time. And then a lot of these other talents are just general like stat increases, like Redoubt and Shield specialization will lead to you blocking more frequently and increase the block value with your shield. One-handed melee specialization increases your one-hand damage. A lot of these are just like stat buffs that you'll get. Increased defense, armor, increased chance to hit. And then some advanced tips and tricks if you want to be a prop paladin, try it out. First, reach out to Escanor. He'll teach you how to do it. Second, a flurry axe is the BIS prot tank weapon. It is fairly expensive because of this. It's got really high attack speed and proximal attacks. One thing that's interesting about Retribution, or about Protection Paladins, is that your Seal of Righteousness can actually proc some weapon effects. So Flurry Axe, for example, I believe can proc off of your Seal of Righteousness. So if you have Seal of Righteousness up, you effectively get to double your proc chance on Flurry Axe. I've not tested that in the wild. I do not own a Flurry Axe, but that is what I've read. So that's something that's cool. Greater Blessings. So this is something that is a little bit of a tactic that prop paladins can use in raids, where Greater Blessings will cause a flat amount of threat based on the level of the blessing and the number of targets. So Greater Blessing of Kings is the best one because you get it at level 60, and if you cast it on warriors, which are going to be the most numerous class in most raids, you can on demand generate a bunch of threat. Theoretically, this can be useful in situations like for Oni during Phase 2 when she's flying and about to land. Paladin can theoretically cast Greater Blessing of Kings on the warriors a bunch of times, grab threat right before she lands, and be at the top of the threat meter when she comes down to grab the boss. It works in theory. I've not seen it work in person, but other people in the guild have, so kind of cool.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. It doesn't get my official endorsement, but it theoretically should work. Another thing that's cool is that Skull Flame Shield and Life Steal effects. There is so the Skull Flame Shield is the most famous prop paladin shield, and that is for a reason. It is because the lifesteal effect on it scales 1-to-1 with spell power. So on the shield, it famously has this 1% chance to Nova everybody, so it does AoE fire damage to everybody in range. It also has a 3% chance to lifesteal 35 life. However, if that scales with your spell power 1-to-1, if you have like 200 or 300 spell power, that 35 healing now becomes 200 or 335 healing that is like life that is stolen from the target. So there are some interesting items that you can play with as a paladin, as a prop paladin specifically, which scale with that with your spell power in interesting ways. All right, last but not least, well, last and also kind of least, we have the rep spec, mostly useful for leveling. And like if we want to solo, this is kind of how we're doing it, unless you're running around as a prot. Well, you can if you want to fight more than 3 enemies at a time. Like prot is actually the way to go. If you're AOE farming, prot is like really really good at that actually. But if you want a single target damage, ret is the best way to do single target damage. The rotation is pretty straightforward for ret. You're using your judgments and rebuffing your seals on cooldown. Judgment of the Crusader is your judgment that will add holy damage to the target. So you want to use that on fights that are roughly greater than 30 seconds. I don't have an exact breakdown on where that is. It kind of depends on a couple of different factors, like what your like what seal you're using and that kind of stuff. But generally, if you're using that instead of a judgment of command or righteousness, like you're losing that amount of damage from that judgment. So on shorter fights, it doesn't make sense to put up. You should just be judging your righteousness or command on cooldown instead. If it's like a mini boss or like a boss, then Crusader can make some sense. Hammer of Wrath is our execute, so use that one in execute range. Go ahead and exorcism on cooldown if your target is undead or demon. And consecration is something that you can use as a ret. It will do damage. It is wildly mana inefficient if you're using it on a single target. And if you're using it on multiple targets, it will still burn your mana shockingly quickly. It's like 565 mana for one cast, so you'll only get a couple before you're going to run out of mana, especially if you're judging on cooldowns. So you have to use that as you can, right? Better to save some mana towards the end and be using Hammers of Wrath than it is to go partway through the fight trying to consecrate the whole way through. For your stat priority, you want to get to hit cap, which is 9%, but if you're a human and you take the precision talent, you only need to get 3 points of hit in order to get to that hit cap, which is actually really nice. Next stat is strength. Next you want your crit, or agility. 20 agility equals 1% crit, which is really nice for us. As a class, we benefit a lot more from that perspective from agility than, say, hunters do. So we get that benefit. Then spell power does increase some holy damage. If you're using Seal of Command, though, strength is going to be a better damage stat for you than spell power generally. Here's a little bit more detail on seals and judgments. Seal of Light and Wisdom we talked about in previous sections. It is something that you should keep that you should be using for the benefit of both the raid and yourself. Seal of Wisdom is nice if you want to be able to, I don't know, keep consecrating throughout a fight. But you only get 1 judgment per target, so you need to keep in mind which judgment it is you're going to be keeping up. One thing that's interesting about Seal of Light and Wisdom, I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about the tanks, but the proc chance on the actual seal when you have it up is normalized, so it is a certain amount of procs per minute. But the proc chance, well, once you judge it on a target, it then goes to about a 50% proc chance. So that means that the judgment of Light or Wisdom, if you're hitting the target with a faster weapon, you will get significantly more procs than if you're hitting the target with a slower weapon, which benefits both you and the rest of your party. Theoretically, if mages or like if casters are super concerned about mana, and Seal of Wisdom is up. If they have a faster wand versus a slower one, they'll actually get mana faster with the faster wand. And this is another thing for prop paladins to keep in mind. You're trying to get a really fast weapon and get as many swings in as possible with your flurry axe. So judging a wisdom on the target will return mana a lot faster for you thanks to that fast weapon. Another thing to consider with weapon speed is I'm breaking down a little bit the seal damage, or the two different major damage seals that paladins have, right? We've got righteousness and command right now. Command is better if your weapon speed is slower. That's for two reasons. One, it is based on procs per minute, so your effective proc chance goes up if you have fewer swings in that minute, right? You're going to get Seal of Command to proc 7 times per minute on average. Some minutes is going to be 3, some minutes is going to be 10. Sometimes you're going to proc 3 times in a row, sometimes it's going to take a minute before you have another proc. Like, it's just really RNG. But it does hit 7 procs per minute, which is why they recommend slow weapons, because your proc chance goes up and you got less swings in that 1 minute, right? You're still going to get the 7 procs. It also scales on that weapon damage. So 70% of your weapon damage, the slower your weapon, the higher that weapon per swing damage is going to be, and that's what the Seal of Command damage is based on. Those are the two reasons why you want a really slow weapon. If your weapon is fast, then you want to be using Seal of Righteousness. Seal of Righteousness will hit every single swing, but it does do more damage if you have a faster weapon because it hits on every swing instead of hitting just 7 times per minute. Another thing about Seal of Righteousness is that the way it scales with your spell power is that a flat percentage of your spell power is applied every single time Seal of Righteousness swings. So your spell power affects a fast and slow weapon the same on a per swing basis. So if you don't have spell power to add like 20 damage to your Seal of Righteousness, if your weapon speed is 2 seconds or 3.8 seconds per swing, you're still getting that same benefit from your spell power. So spell power, again, will help you more if you're using Seal of Righteousness with a fast weapon, which is one more reason why tanks love that fast weapon. They're swinging fast, it's benefiting from their judgments of wisdom or light, and it is benefiting their Seal of Righteousness damage. Another consideration is the Seal of Command can crit and Seal of Righteousness cannot. That matters because Retribution Paladins want our Vengeance to be up. So Vengeance is the key talent in the Retribution tree. It will deal 15% bonus to physical and holy damage for 8 seconds after a crit. Red Paladins need their crit rating to be high so they can be critting regularly so they can get high uptime of this Vengeance. It is core to Red Paladins dealing high damage. Seal of Command also, it crits more like a melee weapon than a spell, so it will crit for double damage, I believe. And I believe it crits off of your melee crit, not your spell crit. That requires some more testing on my end, but Seal of Command really is much more like a melee swing, and that's why you see Retribution Paladins they gear themselves like Arms Warriors, because like an Arms Warrior, they're just trying to get as big a hit per swing as they possibly can to get the most benefit out of that Seal of Command. Going back here, yes, that's the breakdown on seals, judgments. Crusader's worth it again on longer fights, but the fight needs to be a certain duration to be worth more than just a regular judgment for you. Here's an example breakdown of Retribution talents. Key talents here are Consecration. You always get Consecration. And then in the protection tree, on that second row, that is precision. That's your 3% hit talent. So any DPS class is going to want to take hit rating, especially when it's that low in the tree. It's like really easy damage points to get. And then in the rest of the points you can spend in the Retribution tree. You get your Sanctity Aura, two-handed weapon specialization. That's plus 6 damage. That 5 out of 5 at the bottom is the Vengeance talent. The capstone for the retribution tree that I don't have selected here is Repentance, which is a crowd control, basically. It is ranged, and it is instant cast, and it will stun a target. I'll put them into a state of repentance for like 6 or 8 seconds. Really cool in PvP. It's really fun to stop somebody in their tracks, so you can actually close the distance and hit them with your hammer. In groups, like it's less useful in raids, so you're not going to use it. Here's a breakdown again of some of the core retribution talents. Seal of Command, Vengeance, Sanctity Aura is 10% holy damage to everybody around you, which helps you out and maybe the Disc Priest and maybe the Prop Paladin in your group if you have them in your group. I don't know if I've ever seen a priest that's dealing damage that's not Shadow, so it doesn't even help them. Consecration is key, Precision, a couple other talents that are increasing your various stats. Pursuit of Justice is really nice because you can get 8% movement speed, both mounted and unmounted, which is kind of cool. And okay, I think this is my last slide on Ret. But like I mentioned above, Ret Paladin damage is highly dependent on getting crits to keep your vengeance up. I think there's like real inflection points where you have to get a certain amount of crit for your vengeance uptime to get up to like 70-80%. At a certain point, your like vengeance is up enough of the time that more crit is not really helping that. But if your crit is not that high and your vengeance uptime is only like 20 or 30%, you're missing out on a lot of damage. This is another class. This is another situation where world buffs will bump that crit way up and will bump your vengeance uptime way up as well. That crit is just huge. I know everybody's familiar with Frost Oil from Bisque, but Frost Oil does scale, and Dragon Breath Chili, Frost Oil, Shadow Oil, they all scale with your spell power. So Red Paladins are basically the one class that will have spell power and also be hitting people with a melee weapon, so they really benefit from these. The best of these scaling is Dragon Breath Chili, which scales 1-to-1 with your spell power. It's got about a 3% proc rate though, so you might get 1 per hit, but if you got some nice spell power gear on, it can be a pretty juicy hit. Just some little fun things that you can do with your Ret Paladin if you're interested. And then Nightfall is Sumeria's weapon that she wishes we'd get for RT1. It is a two-handed axe that has a proc that increases spell damage to the target by 15% for 5 seconds. In a raid situation, this can add some damage for the rest of your casters. And this is one of those weapons that is best in the hands of a Red Paladin because of the way that your Seal of Righteousness can potentially proc that effect like another weapon swing would. Again, this is something that I haven't tested personally, but I have seen rumors that that proc rate is actually assisted by a Seal of Righteousness. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
How high should your hit percent be?
So the hit percent, you're capping at 9, really 8.6, I think, technically. But if you have the if you're a human and you have a mace or a sword and you have precision, you need 3 points in hit in addition to get to the cap. After that, it's not helping you out. So yeah, you don't have to do that much hit work to get there. If you're a prop paladin, it's going to be the same, where you can still get the precision talent. Then if you're a human, depending on what weapon you're using, you either need 3 or 6 points to get to hit cap. I don't think prop paladins worry about hit cap so much, though. I think they're more focused on mitigation and spell damage, though. But
Props are very sandbox.
where you can just do whatever you want. Any other questions? All right, well, that concludes my slides, and it's 9 o'clock, so I hope anybody who's rating has left this at some of this point. Thank you all for attending my presentation. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me offline after this, I'm easy to reach here on Discord. Any tips on Paladin life that I can give, I'm more than happy to share. So thanks everybody for coming. I will, assuming this recording went according to plan, I will be posting it. And yeah, I can also share these slides if anybody's interested.
Thank you.